The Young and the Restless spoilers in a shocking twist that shattered the illusion of a seemingly joyful occasion. Kyle Abbott once again managed to baffle the residents of Genoa City, and likely the viewers around the world, by making one of the most reckless and morally dubious decisions of his already questionable career. On June 3, during what was supposed to be a night of celebration for Nikki Newman's birthday, the spotlight was hijacked by a storm of manipulation, betrayal, and emotional landmines laid out with the chilling precision of a master strategist. And at the heart of it all stood Kyle, caught in the web of Victor Newman's ruthless empire, holding a pen that would seal not only a contract, but potentially his own destruction. It began at the GCAC bar, a place where so many battles had been fought in whispers and side glances, but none quite like this. Kyle, who has been spiraling deeper into an identity crisis ever since his divorce, had been teetering on the edge of moral compromise, but nothing could have prepared anyone for what he would do next. Seated opposite the towering figure of Victor Newman, the man who built his legacy on intimidation, power, and silence, Kyle unveiled a legal document so outrageous, so disturbingly calculating, that it sucked the air out of the room, a binding contract that gave Victor dominion over Kyle's personal relationship with Claire Grace. The terms read like the plot of a dystopian novel disguised as a legal agreement. Should Kyle, in Victor's subjective estimation, emotionally harm Claire, he would forfeit a staggering $5 million. Not only that, he would be required to leave Genoa City. His home, his family, his entire life, forever. To make matters worse, Victor held full authority to define what constituted heartbreak, rendering Kyle utterly powerless the moment he signed on the dotted line. And yet, under pressure, intoxicated by equal parts desperation and defiance, Kyle did just that. He signed it. No counsel present, no second thoughts allowed, and no one to stop him. What could possibly drive a man, an Abbott, no less, to surrender that kind of control to his lifelong family rival? Pride? Guilt? Love? Or perhaps something more sinister, the quiet voice of failure whispering that this was the only way left to reclaim a sense of worth. For months, Kyle had been reeling from a sense of irrelevance, pushed aside by both his family and the corporate world. He had lost his wife, lost his direction, and now he stood poised to lose his soul in a misguided attempt to prove himself to a woman still trying to understand the world she was thrust into. Claire Grace, herself a fragile enigma navigating the wreckage of her past trauma and her tentative path toward redemption, had slowly become a beacon of light for Kyle, or so he thought. But what he failed to understand was that love built on leverage is nothing but another form of control, and in that moment, Kyle became both prisoner and warden of a relationship doomed before it truly began. Victor, for his part, was visibly taken aback. And that alone said everything. For decades, the patriarch of the Newman family had used power plays to bend the strongest opponents to his will. But here was Kyle, still reeling from the emotional wreckage of his past, still bitter over the years he had spent in the shadow of his own name, walking straight into the lion's mouth without flinching. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't courage. It was a tragic display of self-destruction, cloaked in false confidence. And yet, Victor didn't stop him. Of course he didn't. Why would he? With one signature, Victor gained leverage over Kyle's life, over Claire's future, and most of all, over the Abbott family. The moment that pen touched paper, Victor didn't just win a battle, he claimed an entire war without firing a single shot. Back at the Newman birthday party, the air was still thick with anticipation. Claire, blissfully unaware of the machinations unfolding just blocks away, was finally beginning to let her guard down, to believe that perhaps she could carve out a normal life in a town that once condemned her. But what she didn't know was that her newfound hope had already been poisoned by the very man she was starting to trust. When the truth inevitably surfaces, and it will, how could she possibly recover from the knowledge that the man courting her affection did so under a set of transactional terms governed by her grandfather? And worse yet, that Kyle accepted them willingly, essentially wagering her emotional safety like a poker chip in a game he never had the skills to win? This is not just a betrayal of Claire, it's a betrayal of everything the Abbott name once stood for. Jack Abbott, a man who has fought tooth and nail to retain his family's integrity, may not survive the political and emotional fallout once he discovers what his son has done. The Abbott-Newman rivalry, which had simmered for decades, just gained new fuel, and this time, the fire burns in the most personal of arenas, love. Diane Jenkins Abbott, already teetering on the edge of nervous exhaustion from watching her son unravel, may now be forced to choose between protecting Kyle and preserving what little respectability she has left in Genoa City. And Summer Newman, the ex-wife who once fought so hard to keep her marriage alive, will undoubtedly have something to say about Kyle's willingness to mortgage his future for a woman he barely knows. Victor, as always, will come out on top, at least for now. He's played a long game, knowing full well that Kyle's emotional instability made him the perfect pawn. By offering terms so ludicrous that only a man desperate for validation would accept them, Victor exposed Kyle's vulnerability and turned it into his greatest liability. But in doing so, he may have overplayed his hand. Because for all of Victor's calculating moves, he may have underestimated Claire's reaction. She is not the helpless girl she once was. If Claire discovers this contract, and again, her heartbreak may not be the kind that triggers a financial penalty. It may be the kind that ignites a firestorm of resentment, rebellion, and reckoning. The bigger question now looms: what was Kyle thinking? Did he believe that $5 million was a reasonable sum to put a price on someone's heart? Did he think that agreeing to disappear from the town he fought so hard to dominate would somehow earn him Claire's love? Or did he simply want to feel relevant again? To feel like the architect of his own destiny, even if the blueprints were flawed beyond repair? Whatever the case, the damage is done. The ink is dry. The consequences are coming, and Genoa City will never be the same again. In one foolish moment of blind ambition and emotional disarray, Kyle may have not only sabotaged his own future but also shattered the fragile path to healing that Claire had just begun to walk. And as for Victor, one can only hope that even a man as powerful as he is understands the cost of playing God with people's hearts. Because sooner or later, every puppet master finds himself tangled in his own strings. As the dust settled from Kyle's shocking signing of the prenup contract with Victor Newman, the true storm was only just beginning online. Within hours of the episode airing, message boards, Reddit threads, and Twitter timelines exploded with outrage, disbelief, and the kind of collective fury that soap fans wield like a weapon honed through decades of heartbreak, betrayal, and narrative absurdity. And if there's one universal truth in Genoa City, it's this: when the viewers revolt, there's usually a damn good reason. Kyle had signed away his life, literally and emotionally, for the faint hope of love, and the world had questions. Many, many questions. One user on Soap Central, writing entirely in all caps, screamed into the void, "Kyle offering $5 million to not break Claire's heart and leave town is the stupidest thing I have ever heard." The hyperbole wasn't lost on anyone. Nor was the scathing follow-up commentary. Another fan labeled it the dumbest line of dialogue in Y&R history, while others called for Kyle to be written off, institutionalized, or both. Harsh? Maybe. But was it warranted? That's harder to deny. Because the real question on everyone's lips wasn't just what Kyle had done, but why, and what happens now. Then came Twitter. The digital battleground where hot takes, memes, and conspiracy theories are forged in real time. At Nina Cortland, one cut through the noise with the only question that actually mattered: where is Kyle getting $5 million? And truly, where? With Marchetti spiraling, Abbott finances increasingly volatile, and Kyle's corporate reputation in shambles, the idea that he's got millions lying around is as believable as Sheila Carter becoming a nun. Rumors began swirling that Kyle might dip into Harrison's college fund, that he'd sell his stake in Jabot, or even that he was being secretly funded by someone else entirely. But the most alarming theory? That Victor never actually expected the $5 million to be paid. Because to Victor Newman, money is never the endgame. Control is. Let's step back. Because this isn't Victor's first rodeo. Anyone who's followed the saga of Newman Enterprises over the decades knows Victor doesn't play chess, he is the board. He sees every move 3 steps ahead, and this ridiculous prenup? It was never about protecting Claire. It was about owning Kyle. It was about gaining leverage over the Abbott family without ever having to fire a hostile takeover shot. And it was about baiting Kyle into a no-win situation where his every romantic and financial decision was now monitored, measured, and manipulable. To Victor, Kyle isn't a romantic rival or an annoying nuisance. He's a tool. A pawn. A man with too much pride and too little foresight, easy to bend and easier to break. What the viewers didn't see in that episode, but what is being feverishly speculated about now, is how Victor will weaponize this absurd agreement to tear Claire and Kyle apart. And the key to it all? Audra Charles. Yes, the same Audra who's already proven herself a master of corporate sabotage, seduction, and selective morality. There are whispers I've picked up from multiple sources, that Victor is about to set Audra loose with a very specific assignment: manufacture heartbreak. The plan? Simple, ruthless, and pure Newman strategy. Plant the seed of doubt. Suggest to Claire that Kyle isn't who she thinks he is. A blurred photo of Kyle and Audra at some dimly lit restaurant. A conversation taken out of context. A recording twisted into suggestion. It wouldn't take much. Claire, for all her poise and strength, is still a woman piecing herself back together. She's still vulnerable. And Victor is a man who exploits vulnerability like a shark smelling blood in the water. Because here's the truth no one wants to say aloud: Victor doesn't believe anyone is good enough for Claire. Not after what she's been through. Not after what she meant to Nikki. Not after the trauma that nearly destroyed their family. To Victor, protecting Claire means isolating her, managing her relationships, and controlling the narrative. This contract is just the beginning. It's a leash. And Kyle? He put it around his own neck and handed Victor the end. There's also a darker theory emerging, one far more chilling. Some viewers believe Victor never actually intends to enforce the contract in court. Why would he? Court is public. Messy. Risky. Instead, he may be planning something much worse: to dangle the terms of the agreement over Kyle like a guillotine, using it to coerce him into further betrayals, deeper compromises, and eventually, complete isolation. It's not about invoking the clause. It's about the threat of invoking it. It's about turning Kyle into a self-policing disaster. Every time he hesitates to touch Claire, kiss her, tell her the truth, he'll hear Victor's voice in the back of his head: $5 million. And exile. And what happens when Claire finds out? Because she will. Secrets in Genoa City don't stay buried, they rise like corpses in a bad horror film. And when she does, the emotional devastation could be catastrophic. Not just for her and Kyle, but for the fragile peace that has tentatively existed between the Abbotts and the Newmans. Jack will be furious. Ashley, already barely containing her disdain for Victor, will explode. And Diane? The woman who's spent months trying to rehabilitate her son's image, to convince the world, and herself, that Kyle was still redeemable? This might finally break her. Yet some fans are beginning to wonder, could this be part of Kyle's own endgame? Is it possible he wanted the deal as a way to prove something? Maybe to Claire, maybe to Victor, maybe just to himself. Perhaps this was his way of saying, I am worth trusting, by putting everything on the line. If so, it was misguided at best and catastrophically naive at worst. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that Victor Newman doesn't deal in trust. He deals in outcomes. And outcomes that favor Victor tend to leave everyone else in ruin. As we look ahead, the possibilities stretch out in chilling clarity. Audra's involvement could spiral into full-scale character assassination, with Claire left to pick up the pieces and question every interaction she's had with Kyle. The $5 million clause could be activated in a moment of emotional volatility, perhaps even if Claire simply thinks she's been betrayed. Because remember, Victor decides what counts as heartbreak. And if he sees even the glimmer of a tear, the deal is done. Kyle's gone. Money lost. Reputation annihilated. Harrison left fatherless. And Claire left with another scar to add to a soul already shredded by a lifetime of trauma. So where does it end? Can it end? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a long arc where Kyle becomes Victor's new project, not because he wants him in the family, but because he wants to destroy the last remnants of Jack Abbott's legacy? Because what better revenge for decades of rivalry than to turn Jack's son into Victor's puppet, broken and dancing to a tune he doesn't even realize he's playing? One thing is certain, the audience is not done screaming, and neither is this story. The fallout from this contract will ripple through every corner of Genoa City. Hearts will break. Alliances will shatter. And by the time the truth comes to light, no one, not Kyle, not Claire, not even Victor, will walk away untouched. Stay tuned. The war has only just begun. The true brilliance of Victor Newman lies not in brute force or hostile takeovers, though he's more than capable of both, but in his ability to sit quietly while others unknowingly become pawns on a board he's been arranging for decades. What happened between Kyle and Claire may have looked like a personal, impulsive decision made under pressure. But to anyone who's watched Victor long enough, it's clear, this wasn't just about Kyle. This wasn't even just about Claire. It was about something far larger, far more calculated. Victor doesn't just play one game at a time. He plays them all. And now, with one signature, he has the leverage to pit his enemies against each other in a slow-burning inferno of betrayal, manipulation, and emotional erosion. Kyle may have been the fool holding the pen, but Victor is the one who handed him the contract with a smile, and it wasn't because of any genuine concern for Claire. That document, outrageous in its content and cruel in its implications, was never truly about heartbreak clauses or million-dollar penalties. It was bait. A beautifully wrapped, perfectly timed trap that Kyle dove into headfirst. And now Victor holds the leash. But here's the part most of Genoa City is too distracted to see: Victor isn't just battling Kyle. He's setting the stage to destabilize an entire web of opponents. Jack Abbott, his lifelong nemesis, will soon discover that his son has been lured into a legally binding agreement that makes a mockery of Abbott pride and exposes their family to endless public scrutiny. Michael Baldwin, the once loyal legal mind who's grown increasingly skeptical of Victor's motives, will be placed in an impossible position: defend Kyle and go against Victor, or stay silent and let a contract built on emotional terrorism stand unchallenged. Billy Abbott, ever the loose cannon, is waiting for a spark, and this might just be it. And then there's Aristotle Dumas. The enigma. The man with 1,000 secrets and a past that stretches into corners no one has fully explored. Victor doesn't forget men like Aristotle. He studies them, stores them away, waits for the perfect moment to unravel them. And what better way to lure Dumas out of the shadows than by triggering chaos in the one arena he cannot ignore: the battle over Claire. Because Claire isn't just a name in this game. She's the gravitational center around which these men are starting to spin. Jack sees her as an innocent, a young woman trying to reclaim a life she never truly had. Michael sees her as a client, perhaps a symbol of redemption. Billy sees opportunity. And Victor? He sees a way to control all of them. Because Claire is the only one in this mess who truly, desperately wants his approval. And that's what makes this situation more volatile than anything before. Unlike Nikki in her youth, who pushed back, rebelled, and carved her identity through resistance, Claire has approached Victor not as an adversary but as a guide. She seeks his blessing, yearns for his acceptance, and trusts that his interference is born of love, not strategy. That's dangerous. Because when you seek validation from a man like Victor, you invite him to define your worth. And Victor, ever the master manipulator, thrives on becoming indispensable. So now he has Kyle, terrified of losing Claire. He has Claire, terrified of losing Victor. And somewhere between the lines of that ridiculous contract is the truth: neither one of them is in control anymore. Victor is. And every move from here on out will be designed to increase that control, tighten the grip, and test the limits of their loyalty. Think about it. What happens when Jack confronts Kyle about the contract? A public scandal? A private implosion? Either way, Victor wins. What happens when Claire finds out the price tag placed on her heart? Rage? Withdrawal? A dangerous slip back into trauma? Again, Victor wins. And what happens when Michael is pulled in to interpret or challenge the legality of the document, only to realize he's been outplayed by a man who's been 10 steps ahead from the beginning? Victor wins. Because this is the Newman patriarch at his most dangerous, not when he's shouting, not when he's pushing papers in a boardroom, but when he's quiet. When he moves unseen. When he creates a scenario where his enemies destroy each other while he stands at the center of the chaos with clean hands and a small, satisfied smile. Kyle, blinded by desperation and insecurity, never stood a chance. For months now, he's been unraveling. Stripped of his marriage, his influence, his self-respect, he's clung to Claire like a lifeline. But love born out of collapse isn't love. It's dependency. And dependency makes people do reckless things, like signing away your freedom in exchange for the illusion of stability. Victor didn't coerce him. He simply presented the stage. Kyle took the spotlight willingly. Now imagine what comes next. Victor, emboldened by Kyle's surrender, may begin weaving new contracts. Maybe a non-disclosure agreement to keep Claire quiet when the truth comes out. Maybe a power of attorney clause to grant him legal say over her affairs should she be declared unfit from emotional trauma. Far-fetched? Not for Victor. He's done worse.